morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabwe is a failed state. I've stated this on this platform many, many times. The main reason why we are a failed state is that for the last 45 years since our independence, we've been stuck with the same corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical Zanu PF dictatorship for 45 years. And 45 years of gross mismanagement and rampant corruption have reduced the country into economic ruins and political chaos. The solution is clear. We must implement the democratic reforms to end the Zanu PF dictatorship. And these reforms include democratic reforms of the institution of the constitution. Zimbabwe's constitution is weak and feeble. And we must implement institutional reforms. The constitution at the present moment, even if it was successfully reformed, will only be bolstered by having serious, far-reaching institutional changes. There are some people in positions of power and authority who clearly have committed themselves to the present status quo that can never change. So those are the requirements for us to move out. It is interesting to note that 45 years after independence, we are still failing to define what is it really we should be trying to achieve. And we've had some people keep coming up with all manner of explanations and theories on what needs to be done. I think it is regrettable that we are failing to define the problem, and hence the reason why we've been blundering from pillar to post. Here is a video of one Zimbabwean, Taffy, the man, coming up with his own theory of what is wrong with Zimbabwe and the way out. These views have been expressed so many times by many Zimbabweans. I think we need to follow them up and comment. I'll just play a chunk of the video and comment on it.
As Zanu PF prepares for its 25th annual People's Conference to be held in October, the party stands at a crossroads, grappling with unresolved leadership questions and its long-held ambition to establish a one-party state in Zimbabwe, modeled after China. But unlike China, which can act without repercussions, Zanu PF has a lot to lose. The combination of a multi-party system and a weak economy forces Zanu PF to pretend to be democratic while using force to maintain a de facto one-party state. So therefore, this clash, this struggle between wanting total control and having to follow democratic rules defines what is wrong about Zimbabwe and Zanu PF. I have consistently argued that the problem in Zimbabwe is not the law itself, but the lack of compliance with it. Why does Zanu PF fail to uphold the laws that it claims to enforce? The answer is very simple. The law in Zimbabwe exists primarily to create the illusion of democracy. By holding elections every 5 years, Zanu PF fosters the appearance of a multi-party democracy. The opposition is given just enough space to participate in elections, but not enough to win them. That's the reason why I strongly disagree with people who are calling for reforms. Reforms are not the answer. What's the point of creating new laws when the existing ones are not being followed? For example, Section 61 of the Zimbabwean Constitution clearly says that the ZBC must be non-partisan. Yet, the ZBC operates as a public relations arm of Zanu PF, in direct violation of the law. Furthermore, Sections 208 and 211 of the Zimbabwean Constitution clearly says the military must be non-partisan. Yet, numerous top army generals have publicly declared that the opposition will never govern Zimbabwe. General Sanyatwe was the most brazen of them all, stating that whether we like it or not, Zanu PF will remain in power until donkeys grow horns. He further claimed that the army would use command voting to ensure this outcome. And by the way, Sanyatwe made these statements while still serving as the commander of the Zimbabwe National Army. All this is consistent with the pursuit of a one-party state in Zimbabwe by Zanu PF. Zimbabwe needs a popular revolution, a people-driven revolution.
I just stop it there for a minute. What he's saying is true. Public institutions like ZBC are the Zanu PF in all but name. State institutions like ZEC, the Judiciary, etc., they too are Zanu PF in all but name. The problem is the Constitution itself. It's all very well to say the army must be non-partisan. You need to create the legal framework to make sure that those institutions and the individuals appointed in those institutions remain independent. When General Sanyatwe made that outrageous statement, claiming that Zanu PF will rule until the donkeys have grown horns, what was there in the Constitution to make sure that somebody does not do that? Nothing. In Zimbabwe, the president appoints all the senior police, ZEC, judiciary, and so forth, officials. And he alone can fire them. There's no check and balance here. The Constitution itself is weak. As much as some people want to believe that the likes of Sanyatwe and other police and army officials who have publicly supported Zanu PF, some people want to make it to believe that it's proof that the army are the real power behind Zanu PF. The truth of the matter is, those army generals are in straitjackets. And those straitjackets may just as well have a Zanu PF head of state or leader, Zanu PF party leader, Mnangagwa's head on it. Because what they are saying is what they've been told by their masters, the Zanu PF. There can be no doubt that in Zimbabwe, all senior army officials, police, CIO, are under the control of Zanu PF, the party leader. So we cannot pretend that they are an independent institution. They are not. The Constitution itself has failed to ensure that they are independent. The contradiction with some of these people, on the one hand, they want to believe that the Constitution is strong, and yet they don't want to admit that the Constitution has failed to deliver any meaningful reforms. Free, fair, and credible elections, the very thing that the Constitution should do. That when somebody crosses the line, the Constitution has never come up and strongly punish the individual. One of the most clear instances where the Constitution itself has been proven to be weak is, like I said, where the state president is the one who appoints and fires the individuals. In other countries, while the president can appoint the Secretary of State, for instance, senators have the right to interview the individual to make sure that he or she is suitable. And if he fails to perform during his term in office, they can recall that individual. And at the end of the day, they can say, we don't want this as Secretary of State. You can appoint another. There's no such powers in Zimbabwe. In fact, as things stand right now, even if those powers were to be given to the Senate in Zimbabwe, it has been politicized so much so that the Senate itself is a Zanu PF institution in all but name. This is why I say we need constitutional reforms. The Constitution itself is weak and feeble. We need a strong constitution. And we also need institutional reforms. Zanu PF's Paul Mangwana, who was the co-chair of the committee, the parliamentary committee that drafted the 2013 constitution, admitted, in fact boasted, soon after the referendum of 2013, that Mugabe had dictated that constitution. And one can understand why it is so weak. You do not expect Mugabe to dictate a democratic constitution. And yet, Morgan Tsvangirai and his MDC friends heralded as a democratic constitution. Tsvangirai himself is on record saying that the new constitution was an MDC child. They had no choice but to do that because they had failed to implement even one token meaningful democratic reform in the 5 years of the GNU. They had to present the nation with something so that they could claim that they had achieved something. And Mugabe let them run away with the new constitution as their baby. He knew he had the constitution he wanted, and they were foolish enough to run away with it. It suited Mugabe to the T. Let me just play a bit more of that video by Tafi.
It is the only thing that can bring political change to Zimbabwe, not elections. It doesn't matter what the opposition does. Zanu PF will never let you win any election. They proved it in 2008. Tsvangirai won that election, but they delayed announcing results for almost 2 months. And when they finally did, they doctored the results. A year later, Tsvangirai said, "You can win an election, but you can't win power." I couldn't have said it better myself.
You know what I've always said is that people mistake the fact that you can win an election, but you can't win power. It's a power relation.
It's supposed to be the same.
No, it's a power relations. And let me explain. In our situation, when somebody, you know that elections are announced, while the incumbent is actually in power. And how then do you say, you come and let's form a government with you because I have won an election? If the institutions don't declare you the winner,
right?
How do you then take the power reins? The reins of power?
It's a case of
structures. It's a case of structures. But also you must understand that the power institutions in Zimbabwe were behind Mugabe. And that's why they delayed the announcement for the presidential results.
Well, that point is taken. And indeed, if he had understood, he would have known that the 2008 to 2013 GNU, the primary purpose of that GNU was to implement the democratic reforms to ensure that the control that Zanu PF had over all these institutions is broken. Why did he fail? He and his friends failed to implement even one token reform. They had 5 years to do so. The truth of the matter is, Robert Mugabe realized that if he gave Morgan Tsvangirai and company the trappings of high office, they will forget the reforms. And that is exactly what happened. During the GNU, Morgan Tsvangirai and company took their eyes off the ball. They did not implement the democratic reforms. And so the country found itself end of the GNU and not any meaningful democratic reforms implemented. Zanu PF still had its carte blanche powers to rig elections. We need to implement those reforms. There is no other way out. All this argument that we need a people revolution, one could argue that the fight for independence was a people's revolution. Why did it fail to achieve a democratic Zimbabwe? Zanu PF hijacked the revolution. One can also even further argue that the last 25 years of MDC-CCC have been a people's revolution. People have been risking their lives, their livelihoods, limbs, to elect the opposition into positions of power and authority for primary purpose that they would implement the democratic reforms. So why have they failed to implement even one token reform? The same reasons Zanu PF failed to deliver a free and democratic Zimbabwe. Greed. Calling for another people's revolution will face the same fate. Those lucky enough to be in the driving seats will hijack the process. What we need is an understanding of what needs to be done. And in this particular case, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. History shows us that we need the rule of law. Why we have failed to define what constitutes free, fair, and credible elections after all these years, 45 years, and in the 21st century, beggars belief. There is nothing mysterious or special about being Zimbabwe. The solutions that have worked in other countries is what we need in Zimbabwe. We need to implement the democratic reforms to ensure free, fair, and credible elections. That is the cure to our problem of failed state. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.